The ocean roared like a living creature as waves slammed against the rocks. A lone piece of driftwood floated toward shore, and clinging to it with the last of her strength was a young girl, bruised, exhausted, and barely conscious. When the tide finally pushed her onto the sand, she lay still for a moment, gasping, before forcing herself upright. Her clothes were torn from the storm, salt water stung her eyes, and the humid air of the strange coastline pressed in around her. The forest behind her rose like a wall, thick, ancient, and unwelcoming, yet the sea in front of her felt even more threatening. She knew she couldn't stay exposed. Alone, frightened, and unsure where she was, she staggered toward the tree line in search of anything that might keep her alive. The moment she stepped into the forest, a heavy silence fell. The sunlight dimmed under the canopy and the air smelled of wet earth and unfamiliar plants. She pressed on, her legs shaking from exhaustion, following the faint sound of running water. Minutes later, she reached a small freshwater stream trickling over smooth stones. She cupped her hands, drinking greedily, the cool water cutting through her dizziness. With her mind a little clearer, she scanned the area. She didn't have shelter, food, or tools, but she had to start somewhere. She spotted a large fallen tree nearby, hollowed from decay and partially shielded by thick vines. It wasn't comfortable, but it could keep her out of the wind for now. She crawled inside, resting only long enough to regain the strength to continue. As daylight faded, she ventured out to search for berries or edible plants, relying on instinct more than knowledge. Some berries looked familiar, others she avoided out of caution. Hunger gnawed at her, but fear kept her alert. Deep in the forest, something growled. A branch snapped under heavy weight. She froze, her breath catching. The shadows between the trees shifted as if something large was moving just out of sight. She backed away slowly before running toward her shelter, diving inside the fallen trunk just as dusk settled. Through the night, she heard creatures rustling, small feet pattering, wings beating, and once something large snorting as it passed nearby. She didn't sleep, she only endured the darkness. Morning light brought a sense of urgency. She couldn't last like this. She gathered stones, some sharp-edged, and several sturdy sticks, tying them together with strips torn from her clothing to craft a crude spear. She found a fallen branch with a forked end and shaped it against a rough rock, making a small but useful tool for digging and cutting. She worked slowly, her movements careful and deliberate, until she had at least a few basic tools she could trust. With these, she began improving her shelter, stacking branches for walls, weaving leaves for insulation, and building a small fire pit outside, though she didn't yet know how to make fire. The work distracted her from fear and replaced it with quiet determination. By midday, she approached the shoreline again to search for fish or shellfish. The sea looked calm now, deceptively gentle. She waded into the shallows, using her spear to catch anything that might swim close. After an hour, she managed to spear a small fish, holding it up with a triumphant breath. But her victory was short-lived. As she set a simple fish trap made of sticks, she noticed a ripple far out on the water larger than anything made by a fish or seal. She squinted, shielding her eyes from the sun. For a moment, she thought she saw a long shadow sliding beneath the surface, too large to be normal. She dismissed it as exhaustion and focused on her food, but an uneasy prickling stayed with her. The next morning she returned to check her trap, but it was gone. Not broken, gone, as if ripped free by something incredibly strong. The sand near the waterline was disturbed, deep grooves carved into it. She followed the markings until they vanished into the ocean. Anxiety tightened her chest, yet she forced herself to try again. She crafted a second trap and placed it farther down the beach, watching the waves warily before retreating back toward the forest. Hours later, as she gathered firewood, the wind suddenly shifted. Birds fell silent. The water grew unnaturally still. She stepped out onto a rock overlooking the sea, sensing something was wrong. Then the surface broke. A massive coil rose slowly from the deep, glistening with seawater. At first she didn't understand what she was seeing, just scales, each one the size of her hand, reflecting the light like polished stone. Then a head emerged, large and reptilian, with eyes that burned like molten gold. The creature's tongue flicked, tasting the air, and its enormous body rolled, creating waves that crashed against the shore. She stumbled backward in shock. The snake, no, The monster turned its head toward her, as if aware of her presence. It lunged, striking the water with explosive force. She ran, sprinting across the sand, her feet slipping. She reached the tree line and dove behind a boulder, just as the creature slammed into the rocks where she had stood seconds before. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. The monster lingered another moment before sliding back into the deep, disappearing as silently as it had come. She stayed hidden for a long time, trembling uncontrollably. Once the sea returned to normal, she crept from her hiding place, realizing that the shoreline was no longer safe. From that day on, she avoided the water unless absolutely necessary. She set traps deeper inland snares for small animals, pits covered with leaves. She climbed trees to survey the landscape, learning which areas were safest and which held predators. She gathered dry grass, sticks, and stones, working tirelessly until she finally produced her first spark. When she coaxed the flame into life, she cried not from pain, but from the relief that fire brought warmth, protection, and hope. Day by day she grew stronger. She sharpened her spear, built higher platforms in the trees to sleep safely at night, and trained herself to move silently through the forest. Yet even as she adapted, the thought of the sea monster haunted her. Sometimes she saw its shadow far offshore or heard the deep rumble of the waves when it surfaced. It was always there, waiting. One evening, as the sky turned orange, she heard a violent splash. The giant snake surged toward the beach, drawn by the smell of fish she had left to dry. She grabbed a burning branch from her fire, screaming and waving it as the monster lunged. Flames crackled, sparks flew, and the snake recoiled, hissing. She ran backward, using noise and movement to distract it. It struck again, but she dove aside, rolling across the sand. Using her spear, she jabbed at its face, not enough to injure, but enough to confuse. The moment the creature hesitated, she fled toward the forest, panting, her muscles burning. But she didn't stop until she reached the safety of the trees. She gathered dry leaves, creating a thick column of smoke that rose high into the sky, a signal of hope. Or perhaps a message to anyone out there: she was alive, and she would not give up.